left off last. So we'd left off last week looking at the verses, the three from 7 to 10, where we were looking at the nature of Brahman and our position on where we're at and how we can conceive it. So we looked at the idea very briefly of being a sakshi. And in the beginning, we put forward that the Brahman is, from the Brahman comes everything. So the rope is there, comes a snake. Because of the rope, there's a snake. And then we carried it forward. Then Brahman sort of gives partial responsibility that is existence in our world by saying that you see the mirage, if we take that example. But when you get to that mirage, you understand, see, without the sand, you can't have the mirage. But when you get to the place where you've seen the mirage, you realize it's not there. So it supports the mirage, but it is not the mirage. So the Brahman is not this projection. So we're responsible in that effect, but yet the Brahman is that which backs it. So our position in the world is to actually be as a sakshi, witness, like the petrol in the car, and I want for better example. Like without the petrol, you can't move the car, you can't go anywhere. But it's not responsible for the performance of the car or the accident or the safe journey. So that's the way in which one conceives the Brahman. So our job in the world that we live, our lives that we live, is to practice being that sakshi in and through all of our activities, our perception, our emotions and thoughts of what we pursue in our lives. So the Brahman is something beyond. In fact, I think we were going to, now it comes in the 10th first example of the Arundhati Nyaya. So we have to do everything in this world to actually perceive beyond it. So the example is very beautifully put, that it's like to see the star yonder, you've actually got to start with what you have. So in this case of the example, you may start with the bark of the tree, the trunk. You see the tree, then you move your eye along the line of the branch, big heavy branch. If you see some trees at mighty oak, then you slowly take it towards the thinner branches and the tip of the branches. And yonder or beyond that, you see somebody points out the star. I think, I got it now. I know what it is. It's there. But yet you've not got it. So it's yonder the tree. You can't just reach out and grasp it. You fall off the tree, as it were. So, but you need your karma, bhakti, and jnana yoga to purify and refine yourself to move off that tree, to transform yourself. So you get that realization of that bridge. Behind all that you do, it just falls away and that bridge takes you forward. It's like the life is like all your experiences are like a bridge. And it disappears behind you, but as you're moving forward, refining yourself, you slowly transform and reach that self. So now today, we're going to start on this topic, the deluded. topic entitled Deluded Disregard, whilst the wise glorify and seek the supreme self within. So this, in so many respects, we can see this happening in our lives and ourselves. So I don't know if there's any question before we move to 11, this new topic. Let's start 11.
Avajananti ma mudhaha manushim tanumashritam param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram.
Sam, if you could read the verse.
Verse 11. Fools disregard me dwelling in the human form, not knowing my supreme nature, the great Lord of all beings.
Thanks. So it couldn't be more straight to the point. So fools, whenever the word fool is used, whenever the word fool is used, one moment, Tim, I think Neda's trying to come in. So whenever the word fool is used, it demonstrates, or it's giving us an indication, as human beings, we have the potential to reach that truth, the self. And foolishly, we get involved in everything else but the self. So fools disregard me dwelling in a human form, not knowing me by my supreme nature. So why are we fools? Fools because we identify implicitly with our material equipments, and then we suffer. So when we identify with our body, we become that physical personality. And you have to just check it out. When you identify, so many things we're affected by every single day, what we eat, what the weather is like, some pain here or another. And we become that pain. So it's at that moment in time, perhaps if we identify with some emotion, we become that emotion. We're fully like, there's no separation from it. We're fully in it, got into that quagmire of it. It could be an idea even. You've got a brilliant idea, intellectual. So whatever you perceive, feel, or think, one gets into that and becomes that. And it's actually, you can check yourself in your day. Oh, I got tripped up with that. Oh, I had a pain in one place and it weighed me down. But it's getting off that identification and understanding. It's not me who's cold. It's not me with the pain. It's my body. The body is my possession. And the emotion is my possession, my mind. I can decide what it is to be. But you need a strength of intellect and objectivity to do it. So that's what we're actually building. That's our job, to build that. That's the Sakshi. So it doesn't mean you can neglect your body, mind, or intellect, because then it'll just run riot. The mind is so powerful. But it is saying by sheer identification of the human form is physical, form is something. It's not the Atman as such, formless, without anything. So the Atman has nothing to do with those things. That is the Lord, the being, the Maheshwara, beyond that. So the Atman livens one's perceptions, emotions, and thoughts. But we get caught up with our emotions, our perceptions, our thoughts, our ideas. This is right, they're wrong. Doesn't matter where you go. In the most religious of places, we might say, this is right. I'm right, you're wrong. One can't afford that in spiritual growth. Wherever you go, yes, we have guidelines, but there may be the best of intents of the idea, but you've got to question it. You've got to have that liberality to see if this is the way to do it or not for you. Instead, that total identification with that idea, that emotion, that feeling, that body of whatever's going on with it, the weather, something goes up or down, the loss or the profit, that total identification causes us to suffer that affectation. So we're always suffering. So saying it's foolish that we identify with our material equipments in that way and then suffer. If it's cold, we suffer. We've not got enough clothes on. If it's hot, we also suffer. If there's one day of snow, it will be on the news forever and ever. Everybody's suffering. And if you've not thought of suffering, you'll hear it on the news to suffer. We had 2 to 3 days of heat in this country, in the UK, we are, sometime a year or 2 back, and everybody was suffering. So it's actually seeing it for what it is and thinking, how do we get around this? So when your identification is there, it saps your energy, you suffer. Instead of giving yourself a little bit of elbow room to see, what do I need to do in order to approach this differently? So it's actually your body that is cold or hot, not you. It's actually you get upset at some emotion which somebody has not allowed you to fulfill, or something didn't get fulfilled. Not you. Your mind gets upset, not you. Your mind gets lonely, not you. Stressed, not you. Yourself. Intellect. If it's intellect in truth, it won't be irrational. But if it's being held hostage by the mind's emotions, you can reason anything out and justify it. Especially in a religious parlance, it gets really messed up. Because we've identified with our material equipments. But that's not the self, the Atman. So by sheer association, we make that assumption and suffer. So you've got to give yourself elbow room. Let's read it. Let's read. Does it give the magnet example here? Let's see. Let's read it.
Yeah, verse 11, chapter 9. The second topic, covering verses 11 to 19, shows how the deluded disregard while the wise glorify and seek the Supreme Self within. A human being comprises spirit and matter. Matter consists of the physical body, mind, and intellect. The body houses 2 sets of organs known as jnana indriyas and karma indriyas. The jnana indriyas are the 5 organs of perception. eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. The karma indriyas, the 5 organs of action. Hands, feet, speech, genital organ, and anus. The 10 sense organs by themselves are inert. The spirit, the supreme self within, enlivens these organs to function in their respective faculties. The self enlivens the eye to see, the ears to hear, the sense organs to perceive and act. In the same manner, the self enlivens the mind to feel the variety of emotions. Without the enlivening self, the mind becomes inert and insentient. The same self again enlivens the intellect to comprehend the variety of thoughts and ideas. Without the self, the intellect too becomes inert. The wise understand the Supreme Self as the great Lord controlling all the functions of the body, mind, and intellect. Without the power of the self, the body, mind, and intellect become ineffectual, inert, insentient. Krishna deplores the ignorance delusion in disregarding this divine power in human beings.
So even when we know about this knowledge, we are involved in our own businesses and worlds, our own lives, what's happening there, our own lack of pursuing what we're supposed to pursue, all the distractions come in. So that association with body, mind, and intellect just kills the possibility of the self deluded. We get attached to it. So when something happens to us, we get affected. So the trick of the knowledge is to get us to that position where we're objective. Yeah, things happen, but they're not happening to our truth. They're happening to all our appendages. So in that way, just as we can see something when it's far away and think about what's going on, you know, you see somebody's problems and you can easily deal with them. You can see it objectively, and it's somebody else's problem. But as soon as it comes close to you, it all goes fuzzy. So it's easy to deal with something with a little bit of elbow room. So we've got to give ourselves a little bit of elbow room from our own perceptions, emotions, and thoughts, which are so thick and fast and furious, as it were. We've got to give ourselves that distance. So that means we've got to keep refining it so they don't, it's so sensational that our senses may relate to the world. It's so takes us by surprise that we become so bounded by it. So that association, we don't see the separation. We just see it's all one and the same thing. It happened there, it happened to us. But yet when somebody that we know has a problem, we might feel it deeply, but we don't get too so upset and obsessed with it. We've got a little bit of distance. So the same thing is what we've got to exercise for ourselves. How might we do that? How might we do that? It doesn't just happen overnight. No, you've got to remember for the amount of times you do things contrary to your spiritual development, that's the amount of time you've got to invest to just balance it out. So if you spent 20 years not thinking of spiritual well-being, you've got to at least do 20 years just to nullify it, never mind to progress it, in effect. We're getting rid of all the junk. It's like cleaning up inside and out. So what do we have to do? Anyone? I've mentioned the example of the magnet and the piece of wood before. I think some of you would have also got it in Vedanta treaties too. Does anybody remember that? That's like how it seems that we are attached to the body, mind, and intellect. Oh, it's us, not our possession. Does anybody remember that? So if you have a magnet and a piece of metal, what happens to the piece of metal if you have a magnet? Anyone? I don't know, just nodding your heads what you know or you don't.
It becomes attached to
It's
it.
like that, isn't it? Yeah. What if you take that as a magnet, take the metal piece away, and then you bring a wood piece? What happens? What will happen? Magnet, wood piece.
There's
Should
no
have brought it.
attraction.
Attachment.
Okay, goes there, drop down. So now if you tie the wood piece to the magnet, to the steel piece, there's steel and wood here, there's a magnet there, what will happen? What will happen if it gets closer? We don't wait for it to get there. Anybody? It's not quite got there.
They will still be attached. The wood will be in between.
Mm-hmm.
But the wood acts as, the detached attached.
Mm. So because of the metal, it looks as though it's stuck to the magnet. But if you take that metal away, the wood will drop. So the wood's not affected by that magnet at all, but it appears affected when they're two are together. So the combination appears that everything's getting affected. But it's saying here that those wise persons who attach themselves to the truth, the self, don't get affected. It's just a play. Just like you watch a play, you don't get affected. You understand it for what it is. You enjoy it, you don't get affected by it in that way. Similarly, the things which happen to your body, your mind, or your intellect, those are your possessions. They're not you. So there's no need to suffer it. If you give yourself some elbow room. But by virtue of association, it appears as though they're being affected, the magnet and the steel and the wood. It seems like the wood is affected, but it's not. So it's still participating, but it's just not affected in the world. You're participating, doing your vasana. You're not getting upset by the ups and downs. It's not holding you back. So when you're unaware, you're unnecessarily suffering. And the thing is, we need not suffer the more we gain a mastery and keep an elbow room. That's what the great sages and saints have been talking about. That's what it's talking about. It's saying, you are. Tat Tvamasi, you are that. So what we're chasing is the reflection, not that truth, that self. So the problem is with the introversion. We have a problem looking inwards. and we chase the outward things. Let's go for 12.
Mogasa moga karmano moga jnana vichetasaha rakshashim masurim chaiva prakritim mohinim shritaha.
Nishi, if you could read.
Of vain hopes, of vain actions, of vain knowledge, senseless, they verily are possessed of the delusive Prakriti nature of Rakshasas and Asuras.
Rakshasas and Asuras in vain hopes. We're chasing the world, basically. So vain hopes, when we refer to hopes here, it's generally we're chasing the future. If I get this, I'll be happy. If I get that, I'll be happy. So we place our present happiness, whatever we're doing, whatever our desires are. We've developed a desire which created the lacuna within us, an emptiness. So we pitch up a need to fulfill that. We want to be happy. So we pitch up our happiness on something future. What's the problem with that? Anybody? Anyone? What's the problem with pitching up our present happiness on future hopes? If I get that, I'll be happy. If I get that, I'll be happy. What's the problem with that?
There's a dependency on something that is not static and that is not permanent. So when you depend on something that's impermanent, the result is also going to be impermanent. And therefore, it's futile attempt to pitch on something that's impermanent.
So we shouldn't do anything?
We should do what we should do without hoping for the outcome, as we learned in chapter 3. We have to do our obligatory duties without expecting the outcomes, without doing the duties for the outcomes, but rather doing the duties for the sake of doing the duties.
Anybody else add to that? What's the problem?
Our expectations, and we get agitated when we don't get what we hope for the future.
Okay. So we have expectations. So both of you say expectations. Good. So we don't. Anybody else? That's true enough, what you both said. Nishi?
It may never come.
May never come. Okay, and what else is happening? May never come.
So what we're doing is feeding into our desires, which, as we've learned through the chapters, are fruitless or endless. One after the other will appear based on your thoughts and feelings and the directions they're going.
Okay. What happens when you base your present happiness on your happiness on future things? What's happening there?
You're not happy in the present.
Missed it. So we're constantly missing life because we've got our happiness focused on if I get that, then I'll be all right. That comes along, it diminishes. If I get that, that will be all right. So the whole of life's gone if I get that expectation, the desire to fulfill that lacuna is if I get it, I'll be happy. It comes, it changes the world, as Vidya said, if I get it. So we got an expectation, I will be happy if I get that. So what about now? So nobody's saying don't aspire, but you can't pitch your happiness on that future. You got to pitch it now and then aspire. Whatever you've got now, you've got to be well balanced in. The issue is that I was mentioning earlier. Is everybody clear? It makes sense to everyone? Okay. So the issue is the problem with our introversion to look within, because everything that we're pursuing, we see it, we think it, and we feel we'll enjoy it, and we enjoy it. So if somebody tells you it's not in the object or being, your happiness, you can't believe it because you meet it, you relate to it, you enjoy it. So it's not easy to convince a person that there's no pleasure in the external objects. You really have to get well versed with it. And that expectation that you've been talking about is always being linked to getting our happiness. Future hope will get, vain hope is vain, expectation that you'll get the happiness in the future if you do that. But as soon as you achieved it, it recedes. The happiness recedes. So you run for the next chase. Every moment you believe it. So there's a constant belief that if I do this, I will be happy. If I do that, I will be happy. So it's quite a distraction away from your truth. If you can't examine your own life, examine somebody else's life and see what's going on. It's much easier. Watch, it's easier. Because each one of us are very clear all of the time, and we think we know what we want. I've got limited desires. I know what I want. I just want that one. Until you get that, and then it pitches up another. So we're always asking for more. Vain hopes. We're never satisfied with what we've got. It's not saying you shouldn't aspire for more. It's the expectation of getting more. Positing your thoughts on the future rather than enabling just to get on with the task in hand. You don't have the expectation of the future. All well and good if it comes, enjoy it. Move, don't keep with it because it will diminish. So we've all got that question. Each time. You've got to ask that question, is that what I want? Each time, because it's ad infinitum. And sometimes you even wonder, question what you're actually asking for. Is it really what I should be asking for? Do I need that? Or is it just a force majeure that everybody's having it? So we're not even on a lot of the times clear on what we feel we want. The thing to examine really closely, it's not in the acquisition, it's somewhere else, and we've got to find that out. It's like we're chasing the reflection. We've got to go within. But the problem is with that introversion, because to get off the desire, it's like saying to a person aspiring for wealth, until they've got it, it's only then that they know they don't want it. You've got to be a bit smart to understand it, but most of us go through it. Always feel that that will fix it. Everybody knows that example of the light in the moon. Yeah, everybody knows that example. Is there light in the moon? Everybody knows, I think. So we all see the moonlight and enjoy it. But there's no light in the moon. What is it? If there's no light in the moon, how are we seeing that light? You know, when we see the moon, what is it that we're actually seeing? Vijay?
It's a reflection of the sun.
Reflection of the sun. So there's no actual light there. Yet we say, what a beautiful moonlight. So it's like there's no actual pleasure there in the object being your people. It's a reflection from you, from your core within that self. So you've got to remind yourself of that when you relate to things. It's a reflection. It's a tricky one to keep reminding yourself. The kingdom of heaven is within. So you've got to have a suspicion that there's something within you, that core self, that the avatars were talking about. Tattvamasi, you are that. The moment one can think on those lines, it changes life. That I'm not this body, man, I'm something else. But the deluded suffer because of that lack of thinking. They're not able to perceive it that way. Let's go to 13. Veronica.
You want me to read it?
Yes, let's read it.
Verse 11 describes those who disregard the Supreme Self as ignorant fools. This verse substantiates their foolishness by pointing out the worthlessness of their hopes, actions, and knowledge. Being senseless, possessed with the delusive qualities of rajas, passion, and tamas, ignorance. The adjective moga means vain. It appears thrice to qualify the nouns, hopes, actions, knowledge. Vain, in the context, means opposed to the main purpose of life. Your life, your mission in this world, the ultimate goal of your existence, is only to realize the self within, the abode of eternal peace and bliss. You have no other purpose, no other goal in life, but you ignore yourself and with a mind confused and deluded, try to find peace and happiness in the external world.
So one question to you, if it's not tamas and rajas that we want to be entertaining, what is it? Sattva. Is that what you said? Sattva. Somebody said it. Sattva. Okay. How do you cultivate sattva? It's easy, you know, we just read it. What are we supposed to do about it? How do we cultivate sattva? What's the first thing to do that we keep harping on about? If you've got a million thoughts of rajas and a trillion of tamas, how do you cultivate sattva to at least counteract that? What have you got to do? Vijay?
Is it to gain knowledge?
Gain knowledge. And then what? What are the principles of?
Karma yoga.
Okay, before we get
devotions.
to the, yeah. So yeah, you've got that in your mind. That's great. So what have we got to do when we're gaining knowledge, just at that stage? What knowledge are we gaining?
Becoming more and more self-aware of the self and your desires.
Okay, so how do we do it? We gain knowledge. If I just keep reading books, will it be okay?
To apply the knowledge.
Apply it.
Okay, you apply it, but what happens before you're able to apply it effectively? What's helpful to you?
It's bringing discipline.
Okay.
Shravana.
So Shravana's taking the knowledge.
Manana is to assimilate the knowledge we've taken in and make it our own. Taking knowledge alone is not enough. We need to convert it into practice. We need to apply it in our daily life. Stop being selfish.
Okay.
Think about something beyond ourselves.
Okay, so those are the principles of knowledge, yes? So we will say, so cultivating sattva is those principles, yes. But if the starting point is taking knowledge, the next point, just cramming with information, isn't sufficient. And it's got to be this type of knowledge, wherever you get it from. Then you've got to reflect. If you take in that much knowledge, you have that much reflection. Otherwise, it's, you've got to think, draw it out of yourself. Can't keep stuffing in stuff. How regularly?
Every day.
Every day at least. Yeah. Then it percolates. When? Who is that?
Early morning.
Early morning. Any specifics helpful? Any particular time in the morning?
4 a.m.
4 a.m. Okay. So you've got to reflect on that idea at least, and then make it. Can you do 4 a.m. if what do you have to do in order to reach 4 a.m. or 4:30 or 5?
Consistently attempted doing it every day.
Okay. Okay, so I consistently attempt it, but what will help me? And what will, even if I keep trying, what will, somebody say, I've been trying this for years and it doesn't work for me. I'm a night person. So what have I got to do there? Often I hear, I'm a night person. I don't do well in the morning. Hey, that's Sattva, just and Tamas got these traits. They're in sync with the universe as you, the individual, and your universe. You can't change those laws. You better go to bed earlier if you want to get up early. So you've got to sleep, yeah? So you've got to put everything in order to raise your sattva. It may sound, it's just one sentence we read here very quickly. But you've got to analyze it, reflect on it, and then kind of start doing it. If you can't start doing it, start looking at what is there which is hindering you, and then develop that. So one day you might get to 4 or 4:30, whatever, 5 maybe, even 5:30 you get a bit of time. Whatever it is, inspire yourself to cultivate your sattva, if not anything else. The rest will fall into place if you're taking in the knowledge. Cultivate morning study. There's one person who's been to the academy here in this class. Who's that? Who's been to the academy in this classroom? Yuvray. It's to your credit. Neda. Make your opportunities to be in such an environment. Excels you, makes up that development easier. Not alien. Would you say? Do you think that's true or not true? What would you say, Neda?
That the company is very important. And since most of the world doesn't get up that early, it's a nice environment where everybody does. So it helps at least to get things going. And then once you do it, you develop a taste for it and it's much easier. But I need to practice going to bed earlier, yeah. But I do get up anyway.
So it becomes normal. Helps us. So, just thought we'd stop on that. Let's go next. Read it. Let's read the next part. Let's complete.
The ignoramuses direct all their actions to the world outside with the hope of finding peace and happiness. Their external pursuits never end. They live on mere hopes and expectations. Vain indeed are their hopes and actions. They can never find inner peace and happiness through outward actions. The home of true happiness is your own self. You will have to pursue the self, gain the knowledge of self. Instead, you seek this knowledge externally. No amount of knowledge gained externally can give you real satisfaction, contentment, fulfillment. Knowledge of self alone can satisfy you, fulfill you. With self-knowledge, you gain the ultimate goal of human existence, eternal peace and bliss. Not realizing the wealth lying within, the self, senseless people adopt the passionate life of the Rajasika people, Rakshasas, or the ignorant life of the Tamasika people, Asuras. Such persons live in delusion, denying themselves the supreme glory of self.
Rakshasas, devils. So, dispassionate passion is what one cultivates. Let's go. 13.
Mahatmanastu mam partha daivim prakritimashritaha bhajanti hananyam manaso nyatva bhutadim avyayam.
Ash, if you could read the verse.
Verse 13. But Mahatmas, great souls, O Bharta, possessed of my divine nature, worship me with unwavering minds, having known me to be the imperishable source of beings.
Okay. So, who are those Mahatmas, those great souls? Those persons who worship me, that truth, that self, with unswerving mind, anya manasa, devotion, no other thoughts. A person who maintains the thought of the self throughout their activities, a spiritual person. But we have all sorts of different ideas about who a spiritual person is. You remember in chapter 7, there are different types of so-called spiritual people. Can anybody remember? Those who seek solace, go to a church, temple, mosque, they just feel better. They don't feel stressed. There's nothing going on, so they don't feel stressed. They want something out of it. That's solace. They might stop praying. They want the solace, calm their mind down. But they don't do anything about their lives, perhaps. Or there's the arthati, the one who seeks solace, jignasu, artha, the one who's curious about knowledge, but actually doesn't use it. Don't be curious, use it for that growth. Don't just take in knowledge. So one may do it to get something material out of it, solace, or curiosity. So whatever you're reading, Gita, Quran, Bible, some philosophical texts, other. So just take it, think about it, use it. That's what it's for. It's not just a poetic package for you to do nothing or to calm you down. So that person who's thinking, who am I? What am I doing here? Beyond my body, mind, and intellect. Who am I? Is spiritual. Let's read it. Prepare your life. That's what it's about. And let's read it.
The preceding two verses point out the deluded ignoramuses who disregard the self and senselessly indulge in the world. In contrast, this verse describes the great souls, Mahatmas, who pursue the supreme self within.
Mm-hmm.
The wise recognize the self within as the divine component in human beings, the same supreme nucleus in one and all, the imperishable source of beings. Beings are born, they exist, and they die, but the supreme self never perishes. It remains as the imperishable substratum from which all beings arise and into which they merge. Having understood its divine nature, the wise constantly pursue the self through every action, emotion, and thought. Through their spiritual pursuits, they shed their attachments and desires for this world. They reach the state of single-pointed meditation upon the self. With unswerving and constant meditation, the Mahatmas attain the supreme reality, Brahman.
Mm. So there's a reflection upon the truth, the self, that identification of divinity throughout everything, that karma which you do for something higher. There's a thought always in the back of one's mind of uniting with the self, with the truth, a universality. You recognize that this is just your individuality. So one doesn't use the religious or philosophical practices just to calm oneself down, as sticking placer, really delving within to find out, what am I doing here? Who am I? What's my purpose? And you move on it. With that, we'll finish today's class.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So now for the next few weeks, I'll be in India at the Academy. yes. And if we have internet, maybe we can have class, but I think it's going to be hit and miss. So if there is a time, we'll put it up on the WhatsApp. If there's a time where we can have it, we'll just take it like that. Otherwise, if there isn't class, there are the recordings that you can listen to. If anybody's missed, that might be an opportunity to do that. Maybe we can take a look at that. If anybody wants to listen to something in particular, we can have that. And I will be returning back at the end of February. So we'll resume back either the last Wednesday of February or the first Wednesday of March, something like that. So let's take it from there. Meanwhile, make sure you're doing your best to do your own study and reflection, and we'll be in touch. Okay.
Thank you. Have a safe trip and a good